Women's lacrosse cruises to victory, and we're still trying to figure out what happened in Albany with the men. All that and more on the sports section starts, well, whenever. Right now. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the sports section, Long Island's longest-running call-in sports program. And, of course, since we do have people in the studio, you can join us as well. The usual suspects on the air tonight, Matt Mankiewicz, Greg Taylor, Ken Furman. Also welcoming Matthew Kearns to the sports staff. He'll be chiming in here and there as well as we basically watch us how we operate here on WUSB Stony Brook. Okay, guys, we have a lot of business to take care of, and where shall we begin? Because nice win for women's lacrosse, and what happened in Albany yesterday with the men, it remains a mystery.
Yeah, I think maybe we jump in with the women's lax first.
Okay, sure. You guys did the game, so definitely.
Head from there. Yeah, so... I don't want to say they cruised to a 14-4 victory, but it certainly looked like that in the second half. I mean, it was 2-1 at the end of the first quarter, 7-2 at halftime, and then they had a third quarter, six goals in the third quarter. That really just extended the lead for them and got them into running time, scoring one goal in the fourth quarter. Vermont scoring 2 goals in the fourth quarter, ultimately making it a 14-4 game. It was kind of an interesting game too, because I really felt like Vermont came out early and swung real hard at Stony Brook, similar to what we've seen in the NCAA tournament. Where we've seen teams jump out, especially the underdog, and give them like a real hard punch early and see if they can sustain themselves. And I think Vermont did that. And they were able to sustain themselves for a while, but I think the talent of the women's lacrosse team kind of just took over, as they kind of were able to grind through that first and second quarter. And into the second half of that second quarter is really when they took over.
One thing you can definitely count on with this women's lacrosse team is that it kind of reminds you of, to bring up a subject that we will be touching on a little bit later, Stony Brook versus Kansas earlier this year. Yeah, you play with them for about 10 minutes, and then the superior depth takes over, and it becomes a one-sided game. And that's been the case in the America East for quite some time now. And it seems to be the proof of a team that can match Stony Brook is a team that can stay with them the entire length of the game.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting because I thought Vermont had come in and they had a nice record coming in at 8-1. They had a number of players that had multiple double-digit scoring. So they share the ball really well, but just not as athletically gifted as some of the female athletes for Stony Brook.
I mean, just take a look at the team. Go ahead. Keep going.
No, I was just going to say, it was nice to see jump in is Arline jumped in here, and she really had a nice game yesterday. She jumped in playing attack, and she had 1 goal and 5 assists. And I felt the way that she played really epitomized the women's team, because those 5 assists, very unselfish. They worked really hard. They played very well together. And in my opinion, I thought Jessie Arline was the one that kind of cultivated that, because she passed up, I would say, her 5 assists. Of those 5 assists, 3 of them were very unselfish. She could have shot herself and scored, but she moved the ball on to Hart or to somebody else for a quick goal. The other thing I thought she did really well is she got some quick starts off the end line, off the shots, where she chased down the shot, won that little race to the end line, got the ball right away, and started up right away. And that led to 2 quick goals as well, too. So I felt like she was, even though, Miss Sarah had 4 goals, Sabella had 4 goals, Hart was 4 and 2. I kind of felt like Arline was the spark yesterday for the team.
Well, that brings up a very interesting point here, because she's a grad student. This is her 5th year with the team, and, mostly a role player, but this was an opportunity. And you know how Joe Spallina likes to set his players up for opportunities to shine. This was it, okay? And this is another dimension we have not seen before. I mean, we've seen her on the field before, but not in this kind of role. So now that she's proven that she can be part of that, you may be seeing a lot more from her. And you see this over time, over the course of a season, where a player that's at the end of the bench begins to work her way in more and more and more and establishes a niche for herself. And this could be a turning point for her.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that coaches will do, like you were saying, Matt, is they'll give people an opportunity to jump in and play. But I think Coach Bellina more than most, and some of that has to do with the competition level, like we were talking about earlier. There's an opportunity against an America East team, which is one of the better America East teams in Vermont, to inject Jesse into the lineup and see if they produce. And I think players are ready for that, with the way that he coaches. Like, well, here's my opportunity, and when I get it, I should jump in and take advantage of it, and then earn more playing time. And in my opinion, I think she should earn more playing time after 6 points for her on Saturday. Really special game for her.
Yeah, and opportunity knocks, especially in the America East schedule, because now what's going to happen on Tuesday is going to be a big question, because we were talking about this. We've been reiterating this over and over and over again since the announcement came down from the America East Conference that Stony Brook would not be participating in tournaments, is that every non-conference game now counts more than it ever did. And we talked about the 3-game gauntlet and the Seawolves taking 2 out of the 3. This is the last ranked team. This is Princeton, who I believe is currently ranked at 10, although with what comes out tomorrow, who knows. But currently ranked at 10, and this is another must-win because, I mean, they've been hanging around the 5 and 6 spot, the Seawolves, and they're in a stretch of the schedule where they're probably not going to move much unless they have a nice win on the road at Princeton.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And to Coach Bellina's credit, I mean, look, they played Tuesday against Brown, Saturday, Tuesday against Princeton, then they're going to play Friday and Sunday. So they're in a real, gauntlet of just game. And I think as a player, you'll love that. But I think as a coach, what you're thinking to yourself right now, okay, we're going against Vermont. Who can I throw into the lineup to change it up a little bit? He started in goal, Hassel the other day in goal against Brown, which I thought was a good move because you're going to be seeing a lot of shots if you're going to play one goal and you're going to have 5 games in a short span. So she got an opportunity to play and played well, and then Arline gets an opportunity to play well, and then maybe you go back to your regulars at Princeton, and then against Arizona and Binghamton, you can kind of shake it up a little bit again and keep players fresh and, keep players on their toes as well, too.
And so, as I was saying, that I'm not sure how the polls are going to come out tomorrow because there were some interesting games that happened. And let's see, I mean, in the Ivies in particular, you've got Yale getting by Penn by 1 goal. You got Cornell beating Harvard in double overtime. Okay. Northwestern continues to hold serve. They beat the 12th ranked Michigan 12-9. Okay. Rutgers at 13, they beat Hopkins by a goal, number 20, and Stony Brook handled them like they did Vermont yesterday. And at top-ranked North Carolina beat up on Virginia Tech pretty good. So a lot of close games here in the polls. Notre Dame lost by 3 to number 8 Duke. BC beat Pitt 19-12, number 2. And Virginia and Louisville, they played a 1-goal game. So I mean, I'm just running by all these close games, and some of these teams, the Seawolves beat handily.
Yeah, and it makes you begin to wonder. I think you always kind of look at it and you say to yourselves, okay, where's the tipping point or where's the break? And in women's lacrosse, you're trying to figure that right now. Where the haves and have-nots? Where does it end? Like sometimes a 9-10 game is a really competitive game, and sometimes a 9-10 game is not a competitive game. Where team number 9 is really with the front pack, and team number 10 is really with the back pack. That's where the rankings kind of take a break. and then there's a divide there.
Not really
this could be
now,
one of
though.
the.
Not in the top 20 now.
No, I would say not, but I think just when you base the Stony Brook women's, when you break, take a look at who they're playing and who they're beating, you say to yourself, maybe if you're 5 or 6, there's a big jump between 5 or 6 and 16. Maybe there's a big jump between 5 and 6 and 10. Well, I guess we'll know that after Tuesday.
Yeah. Tuesday Princeton on the road.
Yeah, I will say though, Matt, I agree with you. It is a really big game for them. Because the rest of the way they don't play a ranked team, and you really can't fall. In my opinion, you had your opportunities. You beat Hopkins, right? You lost to Northwestern. You beat Florida. You lost to Syracuse. I think this is one that you have to win, and stay in that top 10 ranking. If you lose this one, then you're not going to get any help from the rest of your schedule.
Well, that's the most important thing, because look, especially the first half of the season, and this is both men's and women's polls, you see teams with sub 500 records in the rankings only because of who they played. The quality of the loss, so to speak. And yes, and the one reason why the Seawolves are in where they are is because they had quality losses to Northwestern and Syracuse, and they played Syracuse to 1 goal on the road. So no doubt about that. That was a quality loss, if you want to call a loss has any quality. But when you and of course Arizona State on Friday, they are in the receiving votes category. So if they break in, hey, that's even another ranked team the Seawolves can take on. But the fact remains is that after that, you do have Yale, okay, and we just talked about Yale. Okay, so Yale beat Penn. So they play in the Ivy League. So who knows where they're going to be by the time April 25th rolls around. But the rest is America East, and a conference that you have not lost a game in 5 years, if not longer.
Yeah, and I guess you become, Yale fans. If you're Stony Brook, you want to see Yale be successful. Therefore, you can become successful if you can take it to them the way you feel like you could. You're right about the Arizona State game with them receiving votes. I think it's big that they're playing that game at Stony Brook as well too. So, it's nice for them in a way because they're, with Brown, it's Hofstra was essentially a home game. You're playing at Hofstra, then you're at Brown for a little bit of a trip, then home in Jersey, home, and then up to Binghamton, which isn't a huge trip either. So you've kind of gotten those big trips out of the way. And in this stretch where you're playing a bunch of games, you don't have tremendously long road trips, which I think takes a lot out of the players.
Well, you basically have a Maryland-type schedule. Okay, when you take a look at any of the Maryland teams, not just College Park, but because they all play the locals and they don't have very long to travel. But Hopkins did come up here, obviously, but there's more the exception than the rule. But the important thing here is that as far as an at-large bid is concerned, and the other thing about it is if with Stony Brook out of the running for the automatic qualifier, you take a look at the rest of the America East Conference and you say, this conference is getting no love from the selection committee. Because whoever comes out of it with the AQ, maybe Albany will get something resembling a decent seeding, but it's going to be a big drop-off from where Stony Brook was going.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It also jams, in a lot of ways, it's probably going to jam another team up, right? Another conference that might get a 2 or 3 teams, and it is not going to get that because for the first time, the America East is going to get, or I'm going to say for the first time, I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but
well, on the women's side, I think it is. On the men's side, I know back in 2007, the 2 finalists, Albany and UMBC, both went, but they were top 10 teams.
Yeah, they both had quality seasons that year. So for the women here, they're going to get 2 teams from the America East, and that's really not what the selection committee wants to do.
But on the other hand, how do you say no to a top 10 team?
Well, you're not going to say no to Stony Brook. That in my opinion, it's going to be the other team that gets in. So the team that wins the automatic qualifier, where you're really going to be like, man, like kind of like turn your nose up at a little bit for that. Whoever it could be Vermont. You're right. It could be Albany as well too. It'll be interesting to see. But it's interesting. Very quickly, we are running out of March and heading into April, and those kind of decisions are going to be made when you look at the schedule and you look at this. The women are 6-2 now. It just seemed like they were 2-2 a second ago.
Well, that's one thing.
So,
and the other thing you got going for you is, their season regular season ends on April 30th because obviously the tournament's the following week. It always is, first week in May, and things are going fast. And with the team playing 2 games a week, it seems to go even faster.
Yeah, it's going to go very quickly in the next 2 week span. Who do you think? On a side note here, who do you think is going to be the team that goes from the America East? Like, if you were going to take a guess from this, you have more of a knowledge of this than I do.
Based on history, I would think Albany would be the one because they seem to be the one that Stony Brook ends up facing in the finals all the time. Now, I have not been following them that closely. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pull up AmericaEast.com and take a look at what they've been up to because, look, we've been keeping up with our own teams and not necessarily looking at the standings because at this point they really don't affect the Seawolves in any sport.
Right, yeah.
But they say they're still they're still listed in the conference standings, and the individual players still get Player of the Week awards and stuff like that. So at least we have that going for us. But the fact is that Albany's 3-5 right now. New Hampshire is 6-4 overall. But again, you always have to take a look at the quality of the losses. Lost by a goal to Stanford, destroyed Colgate. Lost by 2 to Yale, lost by 4 to Hofstra, lost by 7 to Drexel, that's 3 in a row, beat Canisius by 5 on the road, lost by 5 to UConn, and beat Binghamton to open up the schedule yesterday. So, like I said, historically it's been Albany, but sometimes you have to wonder. But on the other hand, those are quality losses there.
Yeah, I guess if you're in the America East, you're playing out of conference is going to make them quality games.
Yeah,
in a way, right? You're going to be forced to jump in
But on the other hand, strength of schedule, where are the ranked teams? I don't see any.
Right.
You see named teams. You see schools you see schools with tradition. Stanford is in a tough conference. They're in the Pac-12. You lose by a goal to them, and you're not Stony Brook. That doesn't look too bad. Stony Brook should murder Stanford. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because they're taking on Arizona State, a team that is in the Pac-12 and is receiving votes, and they're playing them on Friday. So the upgrade to the schedule, Joe Spallina knows that the America East was giving him no help. It's one of the reasons, one of several, I'm sure, that the move was made to the CAA when the opportunity became available. I always have to qualify everything when I say, and I'll always say over and over again, the books were open. The old organized crime term, because the conferences, when they look to add members, it doesn't happen all the time. And when they get the word out, the A10 saying we want to add a couple of schools, then the school presidents and athletic directors go clamoring and begging. So it doesn't happen all the time, and Stony Brook was ready. The question obviously is now, I think that of all the programs, I think the women's lacrosse have the least trouble transitioning to the tougher conference, because CAA schools you find C ranked.
Yeah, no, and Hofstra's at the top. I'm actually looking at the CAA conference right now, and Hofstra's at the top of the CAA with a 6-4 record. James Madison, they're tied with James Madison with 6-4. None of them have played a conference game yet in women's lacrosse. I'm sure that'll be coming up shortly. The only thing I would say that would make the CAA a little more difficult is from what we've watched, I think Stony Brook is going to be the best team of the group. But are they going to be just in and out day to day, more difficult games to play? Like, you're not going to be able to kind of, cool it down a little bit against the CAA, where you might have to, they're going to force you to play harder the whole way through, which might make the season a little more difficult and the schedule a little more difficult. That would be my guess going into it.
Well, it means
Now,
you
as
got to
far
rely more on your depth once again.
yeah, and going into the kind of down the stretch here, and if the women want to make a run into the playoffs, I was just two comments, and I wanted to see what you thought about this. First quarter against Brown, they got a two. They're up 2-0
Right.
at the end of the first. Against Vermont, they're up 2-1. We looking at a situation where we'd be concerned if we're Coach Belina for slow starts, or is it the big punch that you're getting from teams early on?
Well, I think it's the latter, because these teams know what they're dealing with. Like we said, it's like Stony Brook versus Kansas, where the Seawolves were able to play with them for the first 10 minutes or so, and then Kansas said, "Okay, see ya." It woke them up, sort of, so to speak. But it's not that anybody on Kansas said, well, just, let them play for a little bit. No, Stony Brook would come out, or any other mid-major going up against a power conference school would come out swinging, and then would eventually run out of gas. And that, you see that in every sport. You see that in football. The second half is usually the proof of the pudding. And we see it. You saw it against Syracuse in men's lacrosse last week, that third quarter, where Syracuse just basically said, we are Syracuse.
Right. Yeah, and it's time for us to be Syracuse.
Right.
Right. So now the next thing I will say that I do think is going to be a little problematic for the women's team is the draw controls. It's one of the few flaws that I think that they have on their team, that they're kind of trying to figure out how they're going to go, and it's such a specialized thing, right, Matt? The same with the face-offs in men's lacrosse. You can be super successful one week, and then you go against somebody who's got your number the next week, and then you're not as successful. But with the draw controls here, that was one thing that they really struggled with against Vermont. To be honest with you, they won 6 out of 14. They won 6 out of 20 of the draw controls within the game, which I thought was really low for them. Well, and they threw a couple different players out to do so to get those 6 draw controls.
Well, Zapolsky got one. Let's see, Hampel got one. Massera got one. And Verhulst, who's supposed to do most of the draw controls and did most of the draw controls way back when, early in the season against Syracuse, she got 3. And, yeah, that doesn't tell you much. It tells you that you got a little bit of a problem there. But on the other hand, I see the effort being put in. I mean, Joe Spallina has been trying to find the perfect formula. With the draw controls, you would like to have a Fogo type of player just do all of them. But right now, the Seawolves don't really have somebody that can rise up to that occasion.
No, and it doesn't seem like that. But I don't know, because since it is such a matchup situation, you make you wonder, like, who they do get in the NCAA tournament, whoever team they match up against. Do you feel confident about your draw control specialist going into that game? And if you do, then away you go. You're not too concerned about it. If you're not, then you kind of have to figure, like you said, you have to kind of figure out a way. Is it a handful for a little bit, and then Verhulst, and then back to somebody else. And the one I thought that they kind of leaned on a little bit against Northwestern was Massera.
Yeah.
And I know we spoke about it last week, where she kind of jumped. I mean, she can't do everything, right? She can't score the goals and put the water in the jug as well too, here and line the fields. But in need, I think she's somebody that you could throw out there as well too, especially in the playoffs.
But that also proved the pudding yesterday. She scored 4, but so did Hart and so did Sabella.
Yeah, and it really, in an unselfish way, I thought Sabella had an excellent game as well too. Not only did she had 4 goals, but she was getting some of those hockey assists where they're starting the transition, they're starting to play up, and she
4
was
ground balls.
Yeah, she was getting the ground ball, and she was getting it upfield, and she was leading fast break effort and really making some smart plays in fast break situations as well. And goaltending yesterday was one to watch as well too. I thought Campbell played very well with her 7 saves. They were 7 quality saves, not gimmies. McLaughlin for Vermont, though, I thought played very well. It could have been a bigger margin had she not been in the goal. It could have been a 20-goal game. for Stony Brook because she made a lot of nice saves and a couple of them on free position shots as well too.
Well, I mean, the one team stat that stands out for me from yesterday's game is the turnovers. Vermont turned the ball over, 24 times to Stony Brook's 13, twice as often. And 24 turnovers, first of all, 24 turnovers, you're dead anyway. But the Seawolves forced those turnovers. That means good defense, but it also means that Vermont was a little sloppy.
Yeah, they couldn't handle it. That was back to the athleticism as well too. They couldn't handle Stony Brook's athleticism. Stony Brook really swarmed them when they were riding, and forced Vermont to throw the ball away. And every time they did, I shouldn't say every time they did, but a lot of times when they did it, Stony Brook took advantage of it.
Okay, so let's segue over to the men because the mystery of that first half. Oh my God! Because I mean, I was following, with Matthew Kearns here, the women's game on video. So I didn't really pay a lot of attention to the first half of the men's lacrosse game against Albany. But I take a look at halftime, and the Seawolves are not only down 6-1, okay, but the one goal it came from a short stick D midi, Ben Morshauser. And unassisted. I mean, I didn't see the play, but that happened in the second quarter, and it was all Albany. And I'm like, what the hell happened here? Then I see Dylan Palinetti, 3 shots and nothing to show for them. And I'm like, what did Albany do? I mean, was it all saves? Was it all? It couldn't have been all that. What happened to the Seawolves offense in that first half?
It's almost like they threw a clunker out there. They kind of just didn't come out and play. I knew somebody that was at the game, and they just said that they played poorly, like really poorly in the first half. I'm like, well, it was obvious from the box score that they played. So I was calling the women's game yesterday, so I didn't get a chance to see it, but I knew somebody at the game, and they were just saying how, they just really didn't come out to play to start the game for whatever reason. And in a 14-game season, you're probably going to have 1 or 2 games like that. You don't want that. I mean, that's just the nature of it. You're going to have 1 or 2 games where you're just not going to have your game with you.
Right.
And you're hoping that some of your, like a Palinetti or something like that could get you going or keep you going. It doesn't make a difference how much you yell or scream or, do whatever as a coach. They just don't have it in the tank at that moment. And something's going to carry them through, but yesterday it did not. And it was too little too late, for them to kind of pull it back in.
They came close. But every time they got within 2, Albany would open it up to within 3. And they ended up losing by 2 to 12-10, the final score. But, some of the guys got their goals in the second half. Like McCannell had the hat trick, so had Palinetti. Mack had 2. Armitage had 1, and then Morshauser. But first of all, first half, when a short stick D midi as your only goal, something is very seriously wrong.
Yeah, I would say so. And going through the box score and then talking to some of the people that I knew that were at the game, we'll start with this. They didn't win faceoffs.
Oh,
and that's been their bread and butter. Like Renz Conlon has been really good at the faceoff X, and he did not have a good game yesterday. And they, as a team, they only went 7 for 26 at the faceoff X. And in a game that you lose by 2, that's a huge difference, right, in the game.
Oh, and it definitely wasn't Palma. Palma had 9 saves. Although for the last 8 seconds, Jameson McLaughlin had to go in because that's another thing. We got to get to that, okay? Because there was a little bit of chippiness going on in the final minutes, and basically the 2 teams are beating up on on the other opponent's goalies. But the funny thing about this is that you have a guy on Albany who gives you bad memories of T.D. Yerlin. Nick Carnes was 18 for 25. Those are Yerlin numbers.
They really are, yeah. He really had a day for them. And when Albany was at their best, he was at his best as well, too, right? And even so, he was able to kind of like parlay that to transferring to go to Yale and play there, So Yes, he was fantastic. Now, I don't know if that's an aberration, if that's just a one game thing for him, or if that was, that's kind of what he's been doing all year long. So I think that would be an interesting one to look at. So just 7 for 26, and you kind of ran out of gas at the faceoff X, and they threw a couple different guys out there to do so. The one on the stat that I thought was not good at all, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit with the penalties. 6 penalty minutes for Stony Brook. So they had 6 penalties, and Albany went 4 for 6 with their extra man. And, you're not winning faceoffs. You're getting penalties. And then the other team is producing in their extra man opportunities. Bad recipe for the game for you.
I mean, if I were up there calling that game, I would be running up some. Now, here's something that'll really blow your mind. First of all, I'm just taking a look at Albany's current statistics. Okay, they have 2 guys that are to do Fogo work, Carnes and Regan Endries, and both. Well, Carnes, I don't know how current these stats are. Is 500 overall, which is good, but yesterday he was way better than good. And Endries is 49%, so 44 for 90. I mean, respectable, but not like we saw yesterday. Kind of like a breakout game for him.
Yeah, and like we were saying before with the women's team, I think sometimes it's just a matchup situation where you have the opportunity to match up against another player and they just have Ren's Collins Limber, or if he's just having a bad day for whatever reason. And it just kind of just not going in your direction, and that's a big deal. The other thing that I was looking at as well, too, is for Stony Brook, this is the second lowest amount of shots that they've taken in a game as well, too, which is like surprising to me as well. They had 41 shots yesterday, which is down for them. Their lowest was 39 against St. John's, but I think that had more to do with the score of the game, where they kind of pulled off a little bit. But I mean, you're looking at a team that's shooting in the averaging here in the mid to high 40s. So you're a couple shots low, and you get off to a slow start, and that's part of the problem. Maybe some too many, I guess. Unselfish plays maybe, or just not, and only 22 shots on goal as well too. So you took 41 shots, but only 22 of them were on goal. You'd like to see that one.
I've noticed,
I think, a little bit.
And we've been watching these games, both of us, when we were on the air. Is that I'm noticing a trend, and again, I'd have to go back and do the numbers to verify it, but the accuracy that Stony Brook teams have been known for in recent years seems to be falling off a little bit.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. We were talking about it earlier in the year and saying they're high volume, they're a high volume shooting team. But then I think there's also a piece where you have to say to yourself, I think you have to start recognizing as a player that you may only get 2 shots a game, and if you do, you better make quality shots. And that's a learning curve as well, too. You're not always going to get 7 or 8 shots a game, or get your hands free when you want to, or get your time and room shot when you want to.
Especially really people keying on you, yeah.
Yeah, you really have to, when you get an opportunity to shoot, you really have to make it count. You have to put it on goal and make the goalie make a save.
Well, we are not going to be the only ones trying to sort this mystery out. And naturally, it will be the Seawolves themselves who have a lot of work to do, because they've dropped 2 in a row. And Syracuse was Syracuse. But Albany, first of all, it's one of your primary rivals. And if you were competing for a conference title in the tournament, they are going to be one of the schools that's going to be in your way. And it is a disappointing loss and a disappointing performance in the first half. They came close, like I said. They woke up in the second half, looked a lot better. But those first 30 minutes are going to stick in everybody's throat for quite some time, I think.
And it should be the thing that could get you through. They don't play until, they play on Tuesday, so right again.
Next Tuesday. Not this Tuesday, next Tuesday, April 5th.
So Yeah, you're right. So they got a long stretch here, but Matt, they're 1-4 in their last 5 games, right?
That's not good.
And I know. Listen, I understand you looking at Rutgers and Brown, but the Rutgers game they could have won, and the
Hmm.
Brown game they were leading at halftime, right? And then
They were
Syracuse,
tied at halftime.
yeah, Syracuse is Syracuse, but Syracuse wasn't the Syracuse that we've seen of old.
Right.
They
Syracuse has
were
been
sloppy.
struggling.
Yeah, they were sloppy and they didn't take advantage of them. And then against Albany, they really played only a half of a game. You hate to think this, but could they have played better in the start of the season? Sometimes you play so well at the start of the season and there's nowhere to go but down. And they had some really exciting games. It's nice wins early on. Exciting games, right? The 1-goal win against Fairfield coming from behind against Robert Morris and winning 18-14, then winning the Long Island Cup, which was nice. But you have these nice wins early, you have success early, and sometimes when you have success early, you may forget about the little things.
Well, you know what? I would agree, except for one thing. They had their opportunity to see their flaws exposed against Rutgers, in particular Rutgers. And maybe they said, okay, Rutgers is the number 4 team in the nation. We lost by goal. That is a quote-unquote quality loss. But what bothers me, right, one, the inconsistency. And what's really bothering me is that the first 4 games were against unranked teams and teams that they were clearly better than, and even Fairfield, they only won by a goal. I mean, St. John's, a team that had no business being on the same field as they were, they only won by 7. They should have won that game by more. But again, they brought some freshmen and sophomores in there towards the end, so they didn't make it too much of a blowout. LIU, nice win. LIU beat Hofstra, which just shows you the state of Hofstra. But we talked about it during that broadcast against Rutgers. Okay, this is a team that can go toe-to-toe with the big guys. Then they turn in that clunker against Brown and then beat UMass Lowell handily, and I don't think UMass Lowell has won yet. And, we're thinking we're pretty positive going into Syracuse, thinking that, hey, I'm number one, that they could, one, pull off the upset, and 2, it wouldn't be that big of an upset because of how Syracuse have been struggling. And they're not quite there yet even then. And then Albany, I'm hoping that they hit bottom here, that they finally wake up and say, we got a lot of work to do. And they have time to do it because they've got, about 10 days between games here. So they go to Dartmouth. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting as a coach what you do they're going to go to Dartmouth next Tuesday, but it's interesting what you do as a coach. That you get 10 days off. You're not playing well. One win in your last 5 games. You only have 5 games left. I mean, they can go 10-4 with the teams that they have ahead of them. They can beat all the teams on the schedule, right? So Dartmouth, New Jersey Tech, Binghamton, UMBC, and Vermont, they can win all those games. There's not a problem with that, so they can go 10-4. I think how you handle this break right now, how you handle these 10 days, it's almost like a little mini spring break for the team right now. Do you give them a couple of days off? Do you give them off, today, tomorrow, and Tuesday, and then you get back to work and get away from lacrosse for 3 days? Don't even think about it.
You might want to do that because I'm sure they're pretty stressed over the performance they had on Saturday because it was definitely the worst performance of the year, and could be of some guys' careers that they did not look good. And then they realized, well, this is the other thing. Everybody knew going in that an at-large bid would be a long shot, but with the schedule they had, not impossible. But unfortunately, they lost all the games they needed to win to get that automatic bid. So the other thing is keeping them motivated. Now, naturally, you got a bunch of underclassmen who are going to be competing for jobs next year, so they can't take a year off, so to speak. And then there's a transfer portal, and they bring somebody in who could knock you out of your job. So there's still a lot of incentive to play out and come out with a good record, even though you may not have a postseason to speak of. But the whole point here is that you've been exposed. Okay, this is a talented team. This is a team that had high expectations, and this is a team that is just a little bit short of where they should be, and that results in 4 out of 5 losses.
And you could, and I agree with you, man. I think you could look back on this, and they could go 10-4, and you could look back on it and say, if it wasn't for that mid-season slump that we went in, we'd be right there. Because like I said, they could definitely win the next 5 games. This could be the most opportune time to have this type of a break in your schedule, right? So where you're not playing, Wednesday, you're not playing Saturday. You get a weekend off where you're not traveling and playing in the middle of the season. That's like almost unheard of to do. So maybe coaches got something planned for them to do as a team. But I think that this break might be really good for them. Like in looking at it, I think it could be really good for them. Going to Dartmouth to play Dartmouth. I mean, that's going to be a mega trip to go up there. But a game that they can definitely win, get yourself feeling right again. Then you go against NJIT, who's been struggling and has struggled in the America East as well too. The interesting game will be against Binghamton, because Binghamton's 2-0 in the America East, not with a tremendous record by any stretch of the mean, and they're for only 4-4. They're 2-0. They had beaten Albany. That's Albany's one lone America East loss. So I think that makes it become a little bit more of an interesting game, where Binghamton was kind of like the doormat of the America East for a while. Now they've turned it around, it looks like, a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see. UMBC 2-4, NJIT's 0-8, UMass Lowell 1-7. They already beat them, right? Albany's 2-5.
Yeah,
like you said though, against quality teams, they have a quality schedule.
Well,
similar to
Albany women, definitely. Now let's say, Albany men tend to play a very tough schedule too. Lost 16-8 to Cornell, lost 14-12 to Drexel, beat Siena, lost to UMass by 3, got murdered by Maryland 24-6. So they're not that good. And Binghamton beat them by 8.
They're stuck, I think, in Albany right now. They're stuck in like a little bit of a limbo land, where when they were really good with the Thompsons, and then they had the Tahoka.
They also had, Nanticoke turned out he fizzled.
Yes, yeah.
He had 2 years, and then he got a couple of fights on the field, and they got kicked off the team. And the other thing too is that Nanticoke was one of those guys where great natural ability. I mean, talking about one of the best stick handlers I've ever seen. That includes the Thompsons, and never developed it.
Yeah, he just never.
The Thompsons,
I would agree with you.
In their first 2 years, Stony Brook could handle them. Second 2 years, nobody could.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. They also had kind of feels, but really the point I'm making is Albany's always going to play those upstate teams, right? Because they're upstate, they should play the upstate teams. That's like Maryland does. Like you play your backyard. But now they've also, because they were really good, other teams are willing to put them on their schedule, so they're non-conference schedules. You lock into games, and they're probably in the contract with a couple of these teams for a couple more years, and they probably shouldn't be. They're not that kind of a program right now. They're in a rebuild phase.
Binghamton, surprisingly enough, you're talking about the 4-4 record. Stony Brook beat Fairfield. Binghamton lost to them by 5. They beat Hofstra by 6. As we said, Hofstra's been struggling. Lost to Bucknell by 6. Beat Lafayette by a goal. Got clobbered by Princeton 22-9. St. Bonaventure got canceled, and they lost by 2 to Marist. So, I mean, Stony Brook, the men have kept pace with the women in terms of building a tougher schedule, because, again, the rest of the America East is not, I mean, they're relying on the automatic qualifier. Stony Brook has its sights set higher, and which is good. But again, I mean, we said what the women had to do in that 3-game gauntlet, win at least 2 out of 3, and they did. Stony Brook men did not win any.
Yeah, you're right. With those big games, they did not they did not produce there, and they could have. In my opinion, last week they could have gotten one against Syracuse. They could have stolen one there because Syracuse was really sloppy last week, and they could have taken it away from them.
Tied at the half, tied at 5, and then got one side in the third quarter. And Syracuse was sloppy, but Stony Brook was sloppier.
Yeah, for sure. So you still like all the pieces that they have. You still like all the tools that they have in their toolbox here. They're just not clicking right now. You just got to get back to feeling good and clicking again.
Yeah,
as a team. And I think they're going to get there. I think they're too talented not to get there.
It seems that the other thing that was happening during their wins, they weren't, in a way, when you watch a team, you should, and it's actually to a lesser degree happening with the women as well, that no two games play the same way. I mean, no two games in fact play the same way, but in other words, you're expecting certain plays to occur, you're expecting certain connections on passes, on assists, and they never play the exact same way, which means, yes, you have depth, which means, yes, somebody different rises up in every game, but on the other hand, you don't see them settling into a rhythm. I mean, you want to wind back the clock, there are certain things you saw, with certain guys, let's say your players at the X, and Stony Brook has had a history of good ones, and you knew what they were going to do. Everybody in the building knew what they were going to do, and they did it better than everybody else. Find a cutter up front and things like that. I mean, and you don't necessarily see it with these guys. You don't. And also, in particular, when the situation tightens up, you don't see them go with the go-to. Okay. Yes, Palinetti can be a go-to, but Palinetti is a creator, okay? You need guys, you need a catch-and-shoot guy, okay? And you need the guy feeding them. Mac can feed them, but where's your catch-and-shoot guy, okay? One thing, again, winding back to those great teams of 2010, 2011, etc., Jordan McBride was always there to, whenever you need a goal, and Tom Compitello found him. Okay, Crowley was the creator, but McBride, when you needed a goal, could crank one in. And they seem not to be able to settle on anybody who can do that.
Yeah, they just don't feel confident with it. I was think that I like Armitage but he's more of an inside finisher, than he is an outside shooter.
Right.
I think DeMeo is the guy from the outside that can really let it loose.
He's seen more action as a result. Yeah.
Yeah. I think an injection of him would be good. In particular in that spot as well too, as the outside shooter. I'd like to see McMahon, let him loose a couple times from the outside as well too, and then he could set up that bull dodge of his. Sometimes just getting a shot off from the outside, you put a little move on it, make the goalie make a save, and then the next time somebody comes out to close out on you, you get an opportunity to dodge, and I think that would be beneficial for McMahon's game.
Yeah, get him thinking.
Yeah, but I think overall, what it really comes down to in yesterday's game was the not winning any faceoffs, the poor first half, and I think the 6 minutes of penalties where you let up 4 goals.
Yeah, and 3 of those came from Palinetti, which he isn't getting in trouble that much.
Right.
That could have been a little bit of frustration. Again, you have to watch the video, but we're going to withhold judgment until we do, but that's still uncharacteristic of him.
Yeah, and you hate to see, an attackman get a penalty from that far away because, they're 75 yards away from the goal. There's no need to get a penalty there. Usually they're in the riding situation. Mm-hmm. Like you said, until we can actually see the film, it is. Yeah, right. We'll hold judgment until that occurs.
The jury's still out. But we're going to have plenty of time to talk to coaches and stuff like that leading up to that game against Dartmouth. And Dartmouth will be, a pivotal. And, of course, it's at Dartmouth. It's going to be up in Hanover, New Hampshire. So we're not going to, unless we, do it remotely, we're not going to be bringing it to you. But I think we also have a women's game that day. No, we don't. We'll take a look. But anyway, WSB.FM/sports is the place to go for all the latest information on which games we'll be broadcasting. So, we do also have the baseball and softball teams to talk about. And, softball, okay, just taking a look at what they've been up to over the weekend, and they have been cruising along. They are 14-8 right now. They're on a 4-game winning streak. So, again, you're gunning for the at-large bid, and they have not played a home game yet. But they did beat, of course, St. Peter's. We'll talk about them later on. Holy Cross, they shut out. That's last weekend. But during the week, they beat Hofstra and shut them out. And Fairfield, they were scheduled to play a doubleheader yesterday, but only got one game in and won 13-5, correction. So they have one more game at St. John's on Tuesday. Thursday, we finally get them at home. And we're going to be bringing that to you on WSB.
Yeah, what a really exciting week for them. They go 2-0 this week. They're 14-8 overall, and they've been playing really good ball. You're really excited about where they're at as a team. And I want to say that, Costello at the plate, I mean, she is really kind of was the driving force certainly for them against Fairfield. She went 5-5 against Fairfield. Oof. And I mean, that's unbelievable. And she was doing it again. I think she was an ace there on against Hofstra as well, too. So what a week for her where she's coming in and just, swinging the bat. Well, when you see it, it's like basketball. I think batting is like basketball in a little bit. When you see the ball, coming out of the pitcher's hand and you're just in that groove, it just kind of continues to go for you. And I think Costello's got that going on right now. Right, it seems like a beach ball coming at you, and you're just able to see it, and you swing away and go for it, and then that's kind of what she's been doing, at least this week for sure, right?
And Corinne Badger also, she had 4 hits and a home run.
Yeah, and like you said, it'll be interesting. I really like the way, and I haven't, this is like the first time that I've really taken a long look at the women's softball program and really in-depth look at the women's softball program. I just love the way that they do the tournaments, and I understand it's different than baseball because of the pitching and stuff, because you can throw the pitchers out there more often with the softball. But I love the setup that they had with the tournaments down south, the competition that they play, and I think that sets them up for a nice season. The rest of the way, I really do. I just think it's a neat way to play, and they're benefiting from right now. And Costello's only a freshman as well too, and she's playing this well. That's what you got to be excited about. I think if you're Stony Brook, is just how well that she's playing right now. You almost feel like she's coming into her own. If you're the coach.
Yep, and again. It's not out of the realm of possibility as far as an at-large bid is concerned, and as long as they keep chugging along. Now, also, as we said, we will have them live on WSB on Thursday as they take on Sacred Heart in a doubleheader, and it's going to be a revelation because we have not seen them live yet because they have not had a home game, but we're definitely looking forward to it. Now
they've got the pitching as well too,
yes,
which is really
Dawn Bodrick was terrific yesterday, and is responsible for 8 of those 14 wins. She's 8-4 overall. So, just want to take a look at the where softball stands in the overall standings. Of course, America East competition really hasn't begun for anybody yet, but UMBC is on a 13-game winning streak, and UMBC's been a thorn in Stony Brook's side for quite some time. Stony Brook is at 14-8, UMBC's at 15-4, and Hartford right behind them at 11-8. Lowell at 13-11, Binghamton at 12-11, and they're all pretty good. Maine's at 4-21, but UMBC. Now, let me take a look at the schedule for the Seawolves because they play them over the weekend. Correction. They have them on Wednesday, April 13th, a doubleheader at UMBC. Now, They also have April 13th is listed twice here, so it may just be two
I got on the
doubleheaders, or
schedule.
there's two games.
Yeah.
It's listed. It's a doubleheader. Okay, but it says DHDH, so two doubleheaders. No, they're not playing 4 games. They're 12 and 2, so it's two. It's just 2 games. But they do get them on the road, and then they get another oddity from the schedule is that they get them back at home on Wednesday, April 27th. So those are going to be pretty good games, I think, that we to broadcast. So,
what do you think about them going down there and playing UMBC at UMBC? I think that's an unlucky draw for them to play a doubleheader in midweek against them.
yeah, and not only that, it's again weird that they have conference games in midweek.
Yeah, and it's like a half a series, like 2/3 of the series. It's just yes, it's a weird. Is that Easter weekend coming up after that? Is that why they kind of jam it in there?
It's possible, but the Easter weekend never stopped anybody before. Or what they would do is they play Friday, Saturday instead of Saturday, Sunday, or something like that.
Right. So Easter is the 17th. So no, but they're playing Binghamton on the 16th and 17th.
Yeah.
Right. So that's not.
On the 17th, they're playing Binghamton in Vestal. Yeah. So they're playing on Easter.
That's a weird snafu in the schedule.
Well, I mean, Major League Baseball plays on Easter, so
when
it falls in April.
I just think But to me, that's weird is you're going down midweek and you're playing a doubleheader. At UMBC. I guess if you're going down to UMBC, you got to play a doubleheader to make the trip worth it. Yeah. But then they're coming up here and they're playing a singleton game on a Wednesday.
And I mean, I've been down to UMBC plenty of times. It's not the type of trip you want to be taking midweek.
No, but you are right about the one point you're making, Matt. I do think this is an opportunity for the women's softball team to make a statement right now in an odd way, right? They're having a real nice season. Their pitching is strong, and their bats are starting to come alive. This could be an opportunity for them to make some noise. And like you were saying, not out of the realm of possibility for them if they keep winning. Softball and baseball is not like lacrosse. Lacrosse softball and baseball is similar to basketball schedule-wise. We expect to lose games, right? You don't expect to go undefeated in basketball. You don't expect to go undefeated in baseball and softball. You expect to lose some games. It would be shocking if anybody really went undefeated just because of how difficult the schedule is and how durable you have to be to play baseball and softball. So by 14-8, they go on a nice run right now, and I think they're capable of doing so. So I think this could be a real nice season for them and a nice transition season for them as well, too, if nothing else. Do you know why the game was canceled? The second half of the doubleheader was canceled against Fairfield?
Not. Let's take a look at what the box scores say.
Because it doesn't have a box or anything. So I was looking at it before because I was trying to pick up the scores earlier today to see what was going on. Unless they had bad weather that rolled through.
Yesterday was okay. It was on the cool side, but that was about it. But again, we don't know how it was there. Okay, so segueing to baseball right now. We're at the top of the hour. This is WUSB Stony Brook. This is the sports section. Matt Mankiewicz and Greg Taylor, and welcoming Matthew Kearns to the sports staff. He's just listening in and enjoying. But you can too, and also you can call us 631-632-9872, 631-632-WUSB if you want to jump in on the conversation. But the baseball team, they went up to Maine, and of course another traditional thorn in the Stony Brook Seawolves side. It's either Maine or Binghamton that gets in their way. And they lose the first game 10-9, but only give up 4 runs the rest of the weekend and win 6-2 and 8-2. So their America East record is looking pretty good as they move closer and closer to 500 overall. They're 5-1 in conference.
And it's almost how Dr. Shank has prescribed the season up when he was looking before they got knocked out of the America East postseason. But you play this really, really difficult non-conference schedule, and it sets you up to play well in conference, and that's kind of what we saw this weekend, right? They go and win a series, a 2-1 series. They lose a tough one, I think, to Maine early on. They just kind of have that one inning where they give up. It's the fourth inning on Friday where they give up 5 runs and they just get torn in that one.
And yet they came up with 3 they gave up 5 in the fourth, answered with 3 in the fifth, which gave them life, and then with 3 in the seventh got within 1 but couldn't seal the deal.
Yeah, and and that's the one thing that I've been really pleased with when you watch the baseball team is they do fight, right? And I think they're a little undermanned. I know they who was the pitcher that got injured? Man, it's missing off the top of my head right now. Who I felt like had surgery last week. Irregardless, they have been fighting. And, I think this was a good example of them, kind of putting it to the test. They came back, they just fell short, and then they couldn't get anything going in the 8th and the 9th inning, right? They just kind of ran out of gas there. So, but, that's going to happen. And they come back and they play 2 nice games the rest of the weekend, right? They go 6-2. Lashy is the winning pitcher in the Saturday's game, goes 5.1 innings. Book has the save, so the pitching not really an issue at all. And then on Sunday or today, it really is, to me, it looks like it's Paradigm's show, right? Going 4 for 5, 3 RBIs, 3 runs, 2 singles, a home run, and a double. I mean, that's a banner day, right, for Paradigm to do that. And that really propels Stony Brook to that 8-2 win.
Well,
and
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to go backwards. You go, Matt.
Okay. We saw it over the last few weeks that the hitting, the weather, it's down around freezing again. But fortunately, the baseball team didn't have to deal with that. It only started to get cold later. But the weather has shaped up a little bit better, and that usually means the bats start to come out, and I think the Seawolves bats have definitely done that. Timely hitting and some power too. And the last weekend's the 2 10-inning wins, 2 walk-offs, and you can't keep this team down at all. Now, of course, the one thing that all teams at this level have to struggle with is coming up with a good weekend pitching arrangement. I say that, obviously your starters, but your bullpen as well.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the tough thing moving forward. So they play Wednesday against Iona, and then it's out to Hartford for their weekend series. And do you have the ability to manage your pitchers and get them really into the spot that you want to be successful? I think it's tough to do that, right? For the Seawolves, but I think the batting has been so good, and what I wanted to say in the Saturday game is you saw both Fox go 3 for 5 and Brown Earring go 3 for 5 with a home run. They go 6 and 10 combined, and I think that's kind of like the spark. And I think baseball is interesting in that, like, once one player gets the bat going, and it leads to other players getting the bat going. It's like a
hitting is contagious.
Yeah, just kind of like all of a sudden you get on a pitcher's nerves that way, and then all of a sudden you start rolling, and the bats come alive. And I think you're right with the warm weather. The bats come alive in the warm weather, and I think we're going to have that, coming up. Obviously, it's going to be cold tomorrow, but they don't play until Wednesday, and then they'll warm up on Wednesday, and then this weekend should be nice as well too. So,
yep, April Fool's Day they will go to Hartford and start a 3-game set there, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that's another thing. You don't see too many, actually don't see any doubleheaders upcoming because the America East have decided to go with 3-day weekends instead of 2 on Saturday and 1 on Sunday, which is good. I think is overall good, and I think it all results in nice 9-inning games instead of the 7-inning games. Never liked those, but at Manhattan after Hartford, they go to Manhattan and Bronxville and for the midweek game, and then they get Albany at home. The nice thing is they get back-to-back weekends with Albany and Binghamton at home, and then a home game on Wednesday, April 20th against Manhattan again. So it's basically a home and home with them. And then the rest of the schedule, interestingly enough, They have they have 2 straight weekends on the road, UMBC and NJIT with a road game against Fairfield sandwiched in between. Then UMBC at home, Binghamton on the road for a weekend, and then they finish the regular season. And in this case, the season overall, because, again, you're not going to get any at-large bids with that non-conference record they have early in the season, against NJIT. And NJIT, we all know, they've developed a bit of a rivalry simply because the games were starting to get really chippy towards the end, resulting in a suspension for Matt Senk, of course, to start the season. But, I think that's going to be an incentive to forget about the tournament, forget about the NCAA. You want to be ready for NJIT.
Yeah, and I think it's a fun way for the players to finish out the season, right? They get to play against NJIT, and you're right. It's one of those. We talk about Albany being the rival for the lacrosse teams, but like you're saying, I think NJIT suddenly sneaking up here, becoming a rival very quickly here for the baseball team. And you're right. And it would be, if they stayed in the America East, a nice little rival, because NJIT is very close. It's not a long trip. You can do that.
Newark. Yeah.
So it's not far at all. Their facilities, they've really upgraded. I think that in that regard, they could become. They're, I think, looking to be a climber as well too. I don't think the America East is going to be the final stop for them because their facilities are so nice. But I do think it could have been one of those natural rivals between Stony Brook and NJIT. I think you're looking at kind of like the same same type of player, I guess. But I just think the natural distance between the two would have been fun.
You know what? I fully expect to see midweek games. NJIT is going to be on the midweek schedule. I mean, obviously, I've not asked Matt Senk about it, and he wouldn't have an answer for me anyway at this point because he's not even thinking about next year's schedule, or upcoming years. But it would not surprise me in the slightest if NJIT got into the rotation with Fordham, Iona, Manhattan, and so on and so forth.
It makes complete sense because it's an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
Right. It's an easy trip to make. And now you have a couple of really nice teams that you can play locally here, right? You can play LIU, Hofstra obviously would be in the CAA. But you're right. You got Iona, you got Fordham. It really is, when you jump into NJIT as well, too. You can say to yourself, you like the games, you like traveling and stuff like that, but man, the bus trips can be long.
Yeah.
And these guys are on the road all the time with baseball. So being able to say, hey, we're only going to NJIT, it's almost like that's got the feel of like a high school travel game.
That's the one thing that I missed about the early years, my early years. And, I have a fellow here who's joining the station as a freshman like I did way back when. And back in those days when Stony Brook was Division III, yes, we played schools that we never heard of. But we played a lot of local schools in all the sports. And, yes, we put together the Skyline Conference and stuff like that. So you got to, back when NJIT was New Jersey Tech, we played them, okay? Back, we were both D3. We're talking about the 1980s, 1990s. So, you got to play Manhattan, you got to play Wagner, you got to play all these schools. And when you upgrade, I always thought that there could be the original concept, let's say the Big East Conference, for example, was all these schools, mostly Catholic, but not all, who played each other routinely, were either independents or in ECAC type insignificant conferences, were getting no love from the NCAA selection committee, and also covered major media markets in the Northeast. Dave Gavitt said, why not band together, form a conference, and reap the benefits? And within 5 years, they did. It was a huge, within 5 years, within 2, it was huge. The Big East became a monster. Well, what if a mid-major Big East were to be formed? And the Liberty Conference in football, I always love those memories because you got to play Iona and Fordham in football as part, and Hofstra when they had it. So it was perfect local conference. Have all those schools. A lot of them were playing on the same level, maybe a little bit below. But look what St. Peter's, perfect segue. Look at what St. Peter's has done. Okay. And you're saying, what would a conference be like with a St. Peter's, an NJIT, a Stony Brook, a Hofstra, a Wagner, an Iona, a Manhattan, and maybe not St. John's still is considered, even though haven't necessarily been playing like a power conference school, they are still considered the Big East. But all those schools banded together and putting together a mid-major conference instead of having to traipse all the way up and down the East Coast of the United States.
I do like the way that you're talking about that as well, too, like that mid-major conference. If I can go back for a second, but even now the Skyline Conference really is a nice travel conference. If you've kind of stayed up to date with it, it's natural rivals. The teams are close to each other, all tri-state area teams. And you're right. If you could stay in the tri-state area and put a conference together, how much better would it be for everyone involved? For the schools, for the athletes, and I have to travel, like you said, all over the East Coast, and it's only going to get more. The travel budget is only going to get bigger in the CAA. It's not going to get smaller. You're going to be able to go down south instead of going up north, I guess. But I would agree with you. That would be a really cool conference. Right, that would be in it. And now it's funny, all the teams that you mentioned that were in that Skyline Conference that have gone from Division III up to Division I, they could have just joined together and done it. If they could have done it all together, right?
Well,
that would have been
that's
fun.
the thing. And that's really why. I mean, yes, Stony Brook left the Skyline Conference in 1993-94 to go to the NECC when they went D2. 94 was a pivotal year because they, first of all, went from Patriots to Seawolves, and 94-95, and that was also the year they upgraded from 3 to 2 as part of the process going to 1. But they were in that Skyline Conference, but I'll just run some names by you. Okay, Mount St. Vincent, Farmingdale, Manhattanville, we used to play regularly, Mount St. Mary's, same, SUNY Purchase, Sarah Lawrence, which we did not, but they're relatively recent. 2014 actually is recent. St. Joseph's of Brooklyn, St. Joseph's of Patchogue, Maritime, Old Westbury, Merchant Marine we played all the time, and Yeshiva. So, not bad. I mean, all within, close proximity of each other.
Yeah, what a great conference to be in. And like you said, like the natural rivals that would just kind of like, spur from that. And I think knowing some people that coach in the Skyline Conference, you're really, since they're all kind of at the same level, going after the same players as well, too, which makes it a little bit of a rival between the coaches as well, too. So at that time, it was probably a really fun conference to be in, right, if you were part of that group.
But yeah, and finally, one of our complaints, and this was shared by a lot of alumni, not just me, not just Jeff Bernstein, not just Kurt Hilton, but a lot of people were saying, we remember way back when, and you remember too, I'm sure, that Pritchard Gym had banners for the D3 achievements, or they won the Skyline Conference, or ECAC this, or AIAW that, and they were all wiped away when we transitioned to D1. It's like Jim Fiore didn't even want to remember them at all. But what they've done since in the Island Federal Credit Union Arena is put a lot of those honors back up.
It's funny you said that, because I did notice that within the last couple of years, and it's so important to do it for a couple of different reasons, because I think you need to connect the athlete from the past to the present. And I think sometimes some of the present athletes have to recognize how far things have come in athletics in Stony Brook over the last, certainly 20 years, but 30 or 40 years. Could you imagine? I don't even know if the athletes can even fathom, not having the sports complex. I mean, they got the indoor arena now. You got the stadium. You got all the fields and stuff. They couldn't even imagine playing in some of the facilities that the former players are playing in. And I think also, if you're a former player, you come back onto campus and you say to yourself, I can't get over what the players now get to play in. How awesome is this?
Well, not only that, all those players are in their 40s and 50s and have money.
Yes, they can donate some money to these
Yes.
things. And I think that is, well, I mean, smart for the university to do that, but you also have to reach back. And I think it's important to there's a lot of people that have gone through and played for Stony Brook that have had quite the careers, and baseball being the easiest one. With the guys with Division III players, but going to the major leagues.
Joe Nathan.
Yeah, that happened. And they, like, I always thought that the baseball team, like I said, was the most successful team in Division III, but the basketball teams as well too, and also, Matt, you say it as well. The best things that happen on campus are the things that the student athletes or the students start and run. And I think that's how a lot of the athletic programs got started. A lot of these guys, they started it up.
Well, think about it too. Okay. First of all, you see hockey. Hockey is a club sport. And again, we keep talking about this, and especially during the hockey broadcasts, that when you think club sport, you're thinking a bunch of guys getting out on the ice, getting some ice time, not even wearing uniforms, and just smacking a puck around. No, it's a lot more organized than that. But the whole point was, go back 40 years, and football was a club sport.
Yeah.
And then the decision was made to go NCAA Division III. Sam Kornhauser was hired, and the rest is history. And that, of course, built up into what you now see. And that football, that Seawolves field, then before that Patriot field, you played on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is before Laval Stadium opened, and the running joke was that Ward Melville has a better field than Stony Brook.
Yeah, it might have been true, in fact, at that point in time. Although in some regard, as a player, we used to always say that there was a little bit of a home field advantage for us when we could get a big name team in. We always felt like we could take advantage of them on that field because they weren't used to shall we say, that level of facility.
Yeah, the
at that
ruts,
point in time,
the bounces. Because that field was pretty. I mean, especially by springtime, it got pretty rough.
Yeah,
it got kind of fresh in September, but not by March.
No, and it was no time for it to recover after the football season was over.
Yeah,
because it was because of the weather situation and whatnot. But I think that's really important for the university to do that, is to bring back, and they're starting to do that more and more with, I think, the Hall of Fame stuff and some of the players that have been inducted into the Hall of Fame from years past, which I think they should definitely be inducted, and from all the levels. It doesn't have to be a Division I. It could be Division II or III. There was plenty of really good athletes for the level that they played at that should be honored for their they should be honored for what they accomplished while they were here.
Well, look, when you have a program that has grown like Stony Brook has, from 3 to 2 to 1, and from the bottom of 1 up to mid-major, up to a step above mid-major. Well, the CAA is still mid-major, but it is a step above the America East. There's no doubt about that.
Sure.
When you're growing the way we have, an athlete from 20 years ago is not going to be on the same par as a Stony Brook athlete today, because we're recruiting a more qualified athlete, so to speak. But that comes to the territory. But the great thing about it is that, we knew what this school was capable of, and they're finally doing it. That's what the big revelation was. And I even got quoted. Neil Best of Newsday actually quoted me as saying it, that, back in the D3 era, we played against schools we never heard of, and now we're fighting our weight class. Okay. One of the reasons why D3, and I have buried in my papers this proposal. Well, it's not really a proposal. It was a plan that Paul Dudzik, remember him, put together when he was AD, of how Stony Brook was going to excel at D3, because at that point, upgrading wasn't even thought of, wasn't even a glint in anybody's eye. So how were they and it was a problem, yes, upgrading facilities, and they did have a nice upgrade around 1988, 89 or so. The softball fields got better. Yes, believe it or not, the baseball field got better, even though it was in pretty bad shape until they finally built Joe Nathan Field. Back back in those days, it didn't even have electricity running to it. It had no press box. It barely even had a backstop. Okay, it was back in the 80s. It was bad. When Matt Sink took over, I'm sure he'll tell the stories too about what kind of a field he had to work with. But even then, just watching the growth, and yes, the baseball team carried the flag to the national level because we're only a couple of years before, Arizona State's game notes had a little paragraphs explaining where Stony Brook was. And 4 years later, they're in Omaha. Okay. So there's no more. There used to be, and again, several coaches said this, and several players, alumni said this, that, calling ourselves Stony Brook University, we're burying ourselves because nobody knows where Stony Brook is. There's no attachment to it. There's no anything. And the comeback later was, for 1 year, Buffalo, SUNY Center, Buffalo, they got to the NCAA tournament out of their conference, and they wore jerseys that said State University of New York, big letters at Buffalo. So to remind everybody where they came from, but everybody knows where Buffalo is. But nobody knows where Binghamton is. Nobody knows where Stony Brook is. And if they're, somewhat smart and learn their state capitals in third grade, they know where Albany is. But it's crazy when they think about it that a few years ago, people were asking where Stony Brook is. And within a couple of years of that, now everybody knows where Stony Brook is. It's no longer an issue.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do, like you were saying, I think baseball team does lead the way with that one. But then you also have the, other programs. The women's lacrosse program has done it in recent years as well, too. And has, as women's lacrosse has become more recognized nationally, shall we say it, more people are playing lacrosse, more people are seeing lacrosse, so
right.
It's become more recognized. I think the men's lacrosse team has done it to a little lesser extent, but when they play Johns Hopkins, all of a sudden, it's a really big deal. And, going to, the team that took it to the quarterfinals as well, too.
Johns Hopkins, we came one goal short of beating Virginia and getting to the Final Four, and then losing in overtime to them the following February.
Yeah. So, there's been great strides, I think, with the athletic programs for sure. And I think there's more to come. I think it is the step. The CAA is the right step at the right time. It'll be interesting to see what the next 20 years brings.
You know what? Great trivia question for you Seawolves fans out there. One of the standard ones was always, what former Stony Brook coach won a national championship? And you'd say Raleigh Massimino, because he coached at Stony Brook, then Villanova later on. Okay, great. Did you know there was another one? You know who I'm talking about, of course. Lars Tiffany,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Lars Tiffany is the second Stony Brook coach to win a national championship.
Yeah, for sure. And he did it at Virginia. He went two at Virginia, I think.
Yeah.
Right? So that would be that's and that's not even that far ago, right? That's not that long ago.
No,
but
Lars
I do
Tiffany took over early 2000s.
Yeah.
Because it was Tiffany, it was John Espy, obviously, for a long time. Then Tiffany, then Soul, then Nagel, and now Gilardi.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see. I think, we've kind of banged on Hofstra, I think, a little bit for going into the CAA and really not, kind of that hasn't materialized well for them. I think it's going to be different for Stony Brook. I think it's going to be an adjustment for sure for a lot of teams. Like you were saying, I think the women's lacrosse team is different. I think the baseball team is different as well too. Softball right now, I'm impressed with the way that they're playing as well too. If they keep their pitching, and with this, if they can get some more recruits out of this as well too, which I think they will be able to, especially since they're playing kind of nationally, they're playing all over the country. I think that's going to be a name recognition piece as well. But I think there's going to be some teams that are going to struggle a little bit early on. But I think moving into it is smart if you want to make it. You want to make it to that next jump. I don't know what would the next jump after the CAA be?
A-10.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Judging from what schools in the CAA have already done, like Virginia Commonwealth, whose women's basketball team played in the WNIT last week. Okay,
Right.
like George Mason, get to the Final Four out of the CAA. And Hofstra, it's happening again because Hofstra's basketball team is starting to get better. How many teams that Hofstra beat wound up in the NCAA ahead of them, kind of thing. And that was a year where would have been a good year to get a second bid for the CAA because Hofstra definitely deserved one. But Mason got in ahead of them, and Mason went to the Final Four.
Right. Yeah, I do remember that now. Yeah, Hofstra was the regular season champ, right, that year?
Yeah. So, I still think the CAA does not get sufficient love, but on the other hand, the A-10 got the shaft this year. So, when you said 9 Big Ten schools, it's always been it seems like it happens with every sport and is a transition, and men's lacrosse had it too, that you had the establishment and then you had the other programs that were trying to break in. And yes, the Syracuses and the Hopkins and the Loyolas and all part of the traditional lacrosse establishment, and they had their little Cosa Nostra going on. Cosa Nostra, by the way, translated from Italian, is our thing. Okay, so you hear that again. I use these organized crime references because in terms of level of organization and how they operate behind closed doors, you start to wonder.
And when I played, only 8 teams made the NCAA tournament for lacrosse.
True.
Right. And, what was the basketball? Was the basketball at 32? It was only because they only moved to 64 to accommodate the automatic qualifiers to see the growth of the sport and to make more money.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it went to 64 in 1985.
Okay. So
there were 48 prior to that.
Right. But just that's to make more money. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
To do such a thing.
And not only that, they're making more money because CBS is paying more and more rights fees. And I'm like, by the way, it was the segue to the NCAA tournament. Why the hell are the Elite Eight games being played on TBS when CBS spends $1 billion plus for the rights to broadcast these things? Is there anything on the CBS broadcast network that will draw a bigger crowd than the late round NCAA tournament games? What the hell are they thinking?
I noticed that last night as well too, and they came back today, and CBS played the games to the Elite Eight games today. So yesterday, watching them on TBS, I was like looking for them, like, what is going on here? And then I looked at TBS today, thinking to myself, all right, I guess are they playing them later or something like that? And I was flipping through, and I'm like, well, they're on now, So I couldn't understand what the reasoning for that was, why they were jumping in to do that. That was really strange to see. But do you want to hit into the?
Well, yeah, because
the Elite Eight games. I mean,
we'll begin with yesterday because one thing first of all. Again, winding back the clock 39 years, and no reference made to this whatsoever, and I was pulling what was left of my hair out. Okay, 1983. Okay, everybody knows about NC State, Jim Valvano, and all that other wonderful stuff, beating Houston, Hakeem Olajuwon. The Elite Eight game that got Houston into the Final Four was against Villanova. And Villanova played them tough. But the one thing I remember most significantly about that game against Villanova was that Clyde Drexler got away with a 6th foul.
Oh, yeah.
They lost count of the fouls he had, so they left him in the game after the 5th foul, and Raleigh Massimino, he was turning red.
Yeah,
but
it didn't take much for him to turn.
Yeah, Clyde the Glide was his nickname. I used to call him Clyde the Slide because he let that slide. But 6th foul call, because of course my family, all St. John's or Villanova alumni, we're screaming at the TV. When that was going on. But I'll tell you something, that around that time, which was my senior year of high school before I entered college, was, when the Big East started to pick up, during my high school years is when my passion for college basketball really started to kick in. And my father couldn't have been prouder because he's a Villanova alum. And the spark for him started then too, when he was in college.
And I mean, the Houston Villanova game was, shall we call it a defensive struggle? Should we call it a defensive battle?
A bricklayers convention.
Yeah.
That's what you call it.
I have to say, I will say, though, I was very impressed in two regards, one for each way. I was very impressed with the way Houston plays defense. I thought that they really did a nice job defensively against Villanova. And I felt like, and Colin Gillespie, who I think is a superb college basketball player, they did a nice job kind of shutting him down. They just couldn't score any points, and Villanova does not make mistakes, and they hit their foul shots at the end of the game, which you knew they were going to do.
Yeah,
and that really was the game. I mean, Jay Wright, you talk about a guy who can really coach. I mean, he does he does it. When you say that a team, they don't beat themselves, they don't make mistakes, and they hit their foul shots, to me, that's all coaching.
Oh, yeah. And I'll tell you something else. Guy Lewis, the coach back in 1983, and you see, here's the other thing, that teams like Villanova under Raleigh Massimino, who, by the way, had Jay Wright as an assistant, okay, right. Teams like that were fundamentally sound, even if they don't beat you, they'll show the rest of the world how a more talented team can. And the one thing they showed the rest of the world was that Guy Lewis's Phi Slamma Jamma, and they were massively talented. Remember, Hakeem Olajuwon, Klein Drexler, okay? You can win an NBA championship with those guys. As a matter of fact, the Houston Rockets did, okay, with Hakeem Olajuwon, only 10 years later. But the whole point there is that Guy Lewis overly admitted, my team doesn't practice free throws. So the light goes on Jim Valvano's head. Okay, we're just going to put you on the line all day long.
Now, the problem for Villanova is Justin Moore is now going to be out of the Final Four.
Yes, he's hurt. Right. Now, what was the results of the MRI? It wasn't. I was at the Islander game today, so he's done. We won't see him again until the next game basketball game he plays, whoever.
He suffered a torn Achilles tendon in the final minute.
Oh boy!
The school announced on Sunday he will undergo surgery this week. Yeah, and missed the team's Final Four matchup. And initially you thought he just tripped.
They were talking Achilles. They saw that thing pop.
Yeah, and then when you saw, when I was watching the game live, right? I thought he just when I was watching the game live, I was thinking to myself, he just tripped over himself. But then when they really zoomed in on him and you saw his calf, just kind of you could see the vibration in his calf, I was like, oh, that's an Achilles. And then they helped him over to the sideline. I think that's going to be a real big blow for them, for Villanova, coming up. And what a tough break for the young man as well, too. Playing his heart out. They get to the Final Four, and they're going to go up against Kansas. And, man, they just, so disappointing for them and for the young man as well, too. I mean, it's such a weird moment, too, because it's like a minute left in the game. And it's always, to me, it's not the game that you're in, right, that it impacts you the most when you lose a player. It's the next game.
Oh, yeah.
It impacts you the most, right?
Definitely.
You can kind of, especially in basketball, because you're used to foul trouble in basketball. You're used to guys subbing on and off the court. You're used to things like that because you do rotate your players so much. But I just kind of, it's going to be tough for Villanova.
Except that Villanova's got the experience.
Yeah. They do.
They can have. There's any team that is capable of having somebody step up. They can do it.
Yes, the next man up for Villanova, and and once again, they're going to hit their foul shots. They're going to, they're one less player on the bench. I guess
83% as a team. Nobody does that.
They just have to stay out of foul trouble themselves. Right?
Yeah, well,
Their
they
bench is
did.
going to be one player shorter.
And neither that was the other thing that was great about this defensive showdown, that both teams had fouls to give towards the end.
I know, yeah. You're trying
Yeah,
to,
I mean,
yeah.
you're talking about a
They're trying
physical
to figure
game.
out the
You're
foul
thinking about they
game.
should be in the double bonus by 10 minutes left.
Yeah, and you're not seeing. Yeah, you talk about a defensive battle in that regard, and it's weird to see that not occur. But then when you move into, and I'll go down the bracket here and go to the Kansas Miami game.
Sure.
Were you able to watch any of that game?
Now that one I missed out on, unfortunately. But the Miami basically did what they did, but Kansas did a little bit better. Is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, they were close through half, and then the Kansas came and just blew the doors off, and then they just ran away with the game in the second half. They might be a team, interestingly enough, that's finding their stride going into the Final Four offensively.
Mm-hmm.
They made Miami look like a 16 seed. And they certainly are not a 16 team. They really rolled up in the second half.
If anything, they were underrated. They were a 10 seed. This was this very easily could have been a Final Four with two 10+ seeds.
Yes, somebody said, I heard this and I think it's so true. They may be the quietest number one seed that in a bracket ever, right? Nobody was talking about Kansas at all.
No, that was the interesting thing too, because we played them, obviously. Stony Brook did early in the year, and they didn't seem they didn't seem the least bit uncharacteristic of Kansas. But they've been sneaking up on everybody because nobody ever talked about them, and they got a 1. How do you not talk about a 1 seed?
Yeah, and they just did it because you know what? What happens is the Cinderella takes over with St. Peter's. Everybody's talking about Coach K with Duke, right? So then you kind of take in the back role, and Villanova as well too has been getting a lot of credit as well. Jay Wright's been getting a lot of the fanfare as well too, and rightfully so for all three of those teams. But
of the three, Villanova is definitely the most experienced when it comes to being this deep this recently.
Yeah, and I think the coaching is going to be an interesting factor because in this one. So, all right, let's go to the other side of the bracket. We'll talk coaches after this, I think.
But Miami, Kansas and Villanova. Look, I've sentimental favorite. I'm never going to go against Villanova, which is one of the reasons why I don't gamble.
Right? Yeah, because you're with your heart here.
Yeah, my heart is always going to be with Villanova, but it wouldn't surprise me if Kansas puts up a hell of a fight.
Yeah, I think that is going to be a really good game. I really do. I'm interested to watch that game. Maybe more than watching the UNC Duke game. Duke takes care of Arkansas. Duke built a lead, and then Arkansas was just never able to come. They were never able to get past that lead. They kind of played them even in the second half in the latter part of the game, but they could never carve into that lead that Duke had created for themselves. And then when North Carolina versus St. Peter's today,
same thing.
Yeah,
same thing.
And they were just a bigger version of St. Peter's. Right?
Well,
their guards were the same, but just better.
You know what? Watching St.
Bigger.
Peter's in North Carolina, especially in the second half, St. Peter's kept pounding it in. The only problem is, again, the size of North Carolina came into play. They couldn't finish. And it's like they weren't necessarily trying to bomb threes. I guess they weren't hitting them. Speaking of teams that couldn't hit a three worth a damn, was friggin' Houston. 1 for 20. I've seen, what I was thinking about. And yes, people may lightning strike me. I was thinking about, I've seen Stony Brook do this, but not an Elite Eight team.
And as
1
they were
for
checking
20.
out some of those,
But what's interesting enough is that Villanova wasn't hitting them there very well either. So they were both pounding it in. And Villanova was getting more success down low. And yeah, Gillespie had a couple crucial shots and of course hit free throws. But Villanova had some crucial shots, but they were both. It was almost like they erased the 3-point line, started playing 40 years ago basketball.
I don't think you're going to see for Villanova. I don't think they're going to see another team as good defensively as they saw in Houston. I don't think the other teams are as good defensively. So I do think they've gone up against their best matchup in a sense.
Every time the ball got out to the perimeter, these threes were they were getting good looks. Houston was. Clang. And you're wondering, you're watching this, any of those hits turns the game around completely.
Yeah.
Because Villanova was hanging on to a 2-point lead. You hit one, turning point.
Sometimes you wonder why you're being left open.
Yeah. You said this before, but that's a perfect example of, Villanova could just hang back down low because, I dare you to hit it kind of thing.
You haven't done it yet.
By the way, last week on 60 Minutes, they snuck it in between games. They did a feature on Sue Bird. And Sue Bird, of course, and we should talk about the women a little bit too while we have some time. But Sue Bird, of course, is one of the greatest women's players ever. It could be one of the greatest basketball players ever, period. And gets a lot of respect from the men as well because of that. But one of the things that Sue Bird was always big on throughout her career was the mid-range shot, which means that she did not, since the 3-point line came in 35 years ago, 1987, if you are standing just ahead of the 3-point line, what are you going to do? You're going to step back behind it to get the extra point. She didn't do that. 17-footer, you're going to give me a 17-footer, I'm going to take it all day long. And she said that the mid-range shot is dead. Nobody does it anymore because everyone wants to step back and get the three.
Yeah, and I think it's actually you're 100% right. It's such a miss in the men's game, right? And when you watch the women play, and you watch them play, they play a better brand of team basketball than the men play in a lot of ways. The men, the athleticism is reigns supreme at sometimes, and certainly when you watch the NBA, you're watching just straight athleticism, people trying hitting shots and dunking and stuff like that. But
watching a tight NBA game in the last 5 minutes versus a college game in the last 5 minutes, and the NBA game is a mess.
Yeah,
they don't seem to know what they're doing out there in terms of fouling people and going to the line and stuff like that. College game is so tightly orchestrated because the coaches know how to do it. But the NBA, anything can happen.
But anyway, so with I just think with the women's game, their X's and O's are just so superior, and they move the ball so well. They're really, like, when you watch them play, you really can, as a coach, or wannabe coach, you kind of dissect what they're trying to do and try to figure out what they're trying to do. So. But to a second here, back to the men's bracket. So I think St. Peter's kind of gets run off the court a little bit here by North Carolina. North Carolina just bigger, faster, stronger. So you're looking at your Final Four. UNC plays Duke, and Kansas is going to play Villanova. Hubert Davis versus Mike Krzyzewski.
You know what?
Side.
First of all, it's storybook if you go for that sort of thing. And me being so anti-ACC because I have a Big East family, it's like, you know what? Go ahead. Do your little fairy tale type of thing, and we'll go watch Duke, Villanova, Kansas. But Duke, North Carolina is the first time, apparently, if they've ever met in the NCAA tournament. Is that correct? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I thought that was like unbelievable for that to be the case. I couldn't imagine that they had never played each other in the NCAA tournament. But I guess they try to orchestrate it so you're not going to play against each other.
Yeah.
And I guess they were saying they were in the Final Four together one other time, but they were on opposite ends of the bracket, so they wound up not playing against each other.
Yeah, of course, never met in the final. Because that
Right.
would be the ultimate, the Carolina and Duke fans' ultimate fantasy, meeting for all the marbles. So, but they do get to meet for all the marbles in the semifinal, and that, first of all, people's heads are exploding, and this, could be, well, you know what, fans of Duke and Mike Krzyzewski. And look, I'm not going to knock Mike Krzyzewski. I'm not going to be a hater because what he has achieved, it's not unparalleled because I'm going there. Okay. There's one other guy, the greatest coach of all, John Wooden, who retired from UCLA as a national champion. There's a very famous picture of him with the basketball net around his neck. In 1975, he retired a national champion, thanks to Bill Walton. And, of course, the NCAA back in those days known as the UCLA Invitational because they won all the time. But, I mean, college basketball was much more competitive by the time Mike Krzyzewski took over as Duke coach. Okay, so no one could be UCLA, definitely not UCLA. And so you're in a different era. It's kind of like, for example, Casey Stengel's 1950s Yankees. Well, no one team has been that dominant ever since. No team has won 8 pennants in a decade. Okay, not even the Yankees. So
Right. Yeah.
it's a different era, and just teams got better, and the sport got more competitive. But the whole thing, it happens here too. Duke 13 Final Fours. I mean, you can't take that away from what Mike Krzyzewski has achieved in this era, and that means he's got to be in the pantheon of the greatest coaches ever. Is he greatest of all time? Again, nobody's going to touch what John Wooden was able to do, even though it was in a different era. It's like no one's going to Michael Jordan versus LeBron James. Different players, different eras, different everything. But Michael Jordan is considered the GOAT because, of the championships and the shots and what he used to do to the Knicks and all the other stuff. But every generation has their GOAT. The whole point here is that the Duke-North Carolina rivalry just gets taken to another level. And, now it's not just, the Cameron Crazies or the Dean Dome. Now it's, the Superdome.
Yeah. The market for it is just tremendous. It's going to be really interesting. And I watched, my son is a North Carolina fan. My wife went to Wake Forest, as a matter of fact. So I have some, ACC connection there.
Conference rivals. Wow.
Yeah, I'm more of I'm a Big East guy myself because I was a St. John's fan when I was a kid. Growing up in Nassau County, that's what that's who you rooted for. But so we watched the last game of the regular season where North Carolina just ran Duke off the court. I don't think that's going to happen again, but I do think that North Carolina is going to win. I really do. It's hard not to get that memory out of my mind of how dominant they looked against Duke in that Coach K's last game in Cameron Indoor, and I think to do it there was really impressive for North Carolina.
Yeah, that's something we have to qualify, that at Duke, no less.
Yeah, but just to be able to get a win for North Carolina in that atmosphere, I thought was tremendous. So I think I think that is probably going to be. I think that's probably going to be the best game of the Final Four. I'm nervous for Villanova. With Moore being out with the Achilles, I'm really nervous for them. I don't know if they're going to be able to muster up a win against Kansas. And just watching Kansas today against Miami, they seem to get it going in the second half. And if that is not, it could be an anomaly for them. It could be an aberration for them for the tournament here. They haven't really played that well offensively, but if it's not, I think they're going to be very tough to beat. if they've got their game
and
going.
you have to start wondering about that Houston game with Villanova. How much of that was Houston? How much was Villanova not playing at their top form?
It could be, and it's such a that's what's so great about this tournament, right? But then now you also have a week to figure it out, right? You're not going until next Saturday. You got until next Saturday to figure it out and get yourself, back to center. And in a way, it gives Villanova a week to figure out what they're going to do without one of their key players in the game as well, too.
Also, it gives people like us a week to just beat the subject to death.
Yeah, we can talk nonstop about what we think is going to occur in that game. Who's going into the championship for you? Because we'll be on the air before this game, before the championship game is played, because that'll be Monday.
Yeah.
Well, who do you think's in the championship?
I have a little tradition, okay? Way back in 1985, when I was doing the sports section then, I picked Villanova to beat Georgetown, and I got razzed by everybody, okay?
Sure.
And of
Patrick
course,
Ewing, are you kidding me?
Yeah, exactly. But you know what happened was, it was Billy Packer, I think, who said it at the time, was that St. John's can't beat Georgetown, and they lost 3 straight games to them. They lost the last regular season game, the sweater game, in the Big East tournament, and in the Final Four. Okay? So, but he said, he quoted Jim Boeheim saying that, no, St. John's probably can't beat Georgetown, but Villanova can. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to go with. If Boeheim thinks Villanova can beat Georgetown, I'm going to cast my lot with them. And they did. And then in 2016, 31 years later, I'm on the air again, right in the studios of WUSB, saying, I picked it then, I'm good. Pick it again. Villanova beats North Carolina with a buzzer beater. So, gotta keep. I'm gonna keep rolling with Nova. Again, there's some sentimentality about it, but it's almost like a tradition now. Villanova gets to the national championship game. I'm picking them, but that's a big if they beat Kansas, which is again not guaranteed.
Yeah, and it's just fun. You got 4 blue bloods, right? You got the 4 of these regulars, and you got some really excellent coaches. And I think Hubert Davis is going to be really the next great coach coming up, right? Don't you think?
Well, also Shaheen Holloway. Shaheen Holloway.
Now, you believe in those rumors?
Well, first of all, look, he is such an obvious fit for Seton Hall. He's got to go there. Okay. Yeah. Now, the big question, though, is, and again, you can't go 2 steps ahead. Okay, you can't say Steve Pikiell's at Rutgers, where's he going to go next? Because Steve Pikiell's job isn't done yet at Rutgers. Just like until Steve Pikiell won the American East Championship for Stony Brook, his job wasn't done there. So if Pikiell, the other thing about it is that this is, again, the wheels turning. St. John's, for example, when we were kids and when we were teenagers and, even into our college years, St. John's was considered an aspirational job. When Lou Carnesecca retired, he let his assistant Brian Mahoney rule the roost, but that was a job, and when Mahoney fizzled out, that was a job that people wanted. And they were wondering who's going to be the man. Fran Fraschilla, of course, from Manhattan. But the whole point there was, which jobs in college basketball are aspirational, as in the last one you want until you retire. Kansas is definitely one of those. Carolina is definitely one of those. Duke, with Shire scheduled to replace Krzyzewski, he ain't leaving unless he fizzles out, unless the team doesn't do anything. Okay? So, Shaheen Holloway, Seton Hall, does Seton Hall become an aspirational job? Wasn't for B.J. Carlesimo. It wasn't for Tommy Amaker. Tommy Amaker actually went downward. But it wasn't. Seton Hall seems to be a stopover job, despite the fact that it's in the Big East. It's in the New York media market. It plays its games in the Prudential Center in Newark. Why can't it be an aspirational job? Why can't he stay there for 30 years?
It's a good question. I think it's a good point. Like, why wouldn't it be an aspirational job? And they've gotten good. They've been, they're not dominant, but they've been super competitive in the Big East. And the Big East is a conference that they can win. And
have
certain, yeah,
because
and
Villanova's one bump in the road with their conference championship streak is Seton Hall.
Yeah, and I think the way the Big East tournament is set up as well too, you could certainly win the Big East, the Big East tournament and have a run in the NCAA tournament. So I don't think it's insurmountable for that to occur. It's a nice basketball conference. And if you like basketball, you're the top dog in that conference. There's no football to worry about. They're going to do what basketball wants to do. So I do think you're right. I think it is set for him to take that over, and I think it would be an excellent run for him. Right, and it could be a place where he could stay for 20 years.
Yeah.
Right, and kind of finish up his coaching career there.
I think Steve Peichel, same thing. I think if he gets the job done, he gets Rutgers to the top of the Big Ten, there's no need for him to go anywhere else.
It's a Big Ten school.
Yeah,
you found your spot. How many times do you want to move?
Larry Brown is the most famous.
Right, yeah.
He likes. He's always a phrase, "Where at is welcome." But he bounced around all over the place, including Kansas, and won a championship there. But on the other hand, how many of these schools had longtime coaches that established those programs, like Fog Allen at Kansas, and James Naismith was there, and he invented basketball. He actually wasn't that great a coach, believe it or not. If you look at his coaching record in the early years of the game, the guy invented the game. Well, he invented it, but he didn't perfect it.
Right. But I think you're right, and I think as these guys, the coaches get older, interesting enough, and I don't think we put enough credence into this. When your children are in school, it becomes difficult to move.
Also very true.
When your children get out of school, and then you have the opportunity to kind of say, well, where do I want to coach? And where do I have an opportunity to move? And I think that's why you see some of these older coaches or senior coaches, shall we say, move a little bit more because they don't have the attachments.
Right.
Of having to worry about, where their kids are going to school and such like that. They can actually bounce around and move around a little bit. And they're kind of good with it. And they kind of almost are making kind of like agreements with their family saying, well, this is going to be the last stop. Right. And this is it. And then they see if they can make it happen.
Or, hey, let's go down to Florida. The weather's warmer or something like that. But on the other hand, there have been schools in power conferences, and you look at Miami and the turnover they've had, in terms of coaches. And it seems to vary from school to school. But, you get one school that lands a guy and stays there for 40 years, and you get another school where they change coaches every 3 years, and despite the fact they're in a power conference. You expect that to happen here at Stony Brook because we are mid-major. A guy or a woman gets good at their job, like Beth O'Boyle, they move up to someplace bigger. Or Steve Peichel, move, and that's just the way things are. As this life is a mid-major, you want that to happen. You want it to be a place where up-and-coming coaches can stop by because that means success for you.
Yeah, and I think it's also what you, as the athletic department, has to look at it as well too. Is you want to be able to say, hey, look what we're doing as well. Not only are we having players move on, but we're having coaches move on. So we, as a whole, know what we're doing here because we're not only seeing success, but also players are seeing success and our coaches are seeing success. And then we can kind of reload with the next good coach who we think is going to be able to lead the program.
Okay. Yep. We've just hit 12 o'clock.